Let me start the presentation. I hope my slides are seen.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Well, very important topic, pathophysiology, and I'm going to show a couple of my case, which helps you to understand what exactly happens between males and females. As far as males are concerned, everybody knows is a macrovascular disease, sudden onset, and all what we need is an intervention immediately. Let's start with this case presentation, which is almost 10-year-old, 24-year-old female, recurrent history of chest pain left side off and on for last 8 months. It increases with exertion, associated with sweating, ghavrat, and breathlessness, and relieves with tablet Sorbitrate, which was prescribed by one of those people in local practitioner. And look at the age, just 24-year-old. The most important thing, when she presented to us at that time, she had absolutely normal clinical examinations. At that time, we went on to do a CPK MB 2 times with a gap of 6 hours each, and a troponin I, which was normal. And this was the ECG of that particular lady at that particular moment. If we spend a couple of seconds on this particular ECG, we can say that some amount of T wave inversion is seen in lead 3 and loss of proper T wave in 4, 5, and 6. And that all she had during that presentation. Looking at all this normal presentation of findings, ECG, enzymes, she was sent home with the non-specific medications. However, the pain persisted and the classical symptomatology, hence the patient came back again and taken for echo. I put on this slide over here, how does the pain of a woman and a man presents? And if you look at this pain of a man is almost a squeezing chest pain, radiating the jaw with the shortness of breath. On the contrary, many females, they will come back with saying that there's a pressure in the lower chest or the lower chest or abdomen with some small amount of a shortness of breath. They may have some indigestion or extreme fatigue. And this kind of a nausea, vomiting with the jaw pain with upper is relatively lower in cases of female presenting with acute incidence of a coronary artery disease. Well, as we said, we did an echo and a couple of people who are sitting over here and they understand, look at the anterior septum, look at the posterior wall, they were reasonably contracting fine. The other hematologic hemodynamic parameters, they were all normal, including LA pressure. We went on to do a 4-chamber view and look at the excellently contracting LV, showing septum as well as lateral wall, then anterior as well as inferior wall showing a normal contraction. Now we have some amount of basal inferior wall which appears to be hypokinetic. This could be a normal variant in number of people presenting at this time. So was the anterior septum as well as the posterior wall. And all these findings with the normal contracting LV, we presume that she was doing well, normal systolic diastolic function, normal everything. And then I took on one of my colleague, look, I said, can we have an opinion on this patient? She's just 24. And he just came out with this idea, guy, I don't believe on this kind of modalities of your imaging. Let's do an angiogram. Why we should do an angiogram with this present lady of a 24-year who has got atypical chest pain with no enzymes, with normal echo? Well, he just passed off, he just pissed off and walked away immediately. Well, echo was normal. We gave a symptomatic treatment and sent her home. Again, she presented back in a couple of days' time. This was severe chest pain. Again, relief with Sorbitrate. Again, CPK normal. Tropi was normal. And now we looked at the guidelines of a management of a coronary artery disease evaluation. She has to be subjected to exercise treadmill or a dobutamine echo or a digital stress echo, whatever she could do. And that's what we tried to do in that particular lady, and she couldn't do it because of a giddiness. Hence, we were left with no choice but an angiogram. And there my colleague pigeon and saying these words, look, I was telling you already, this lady should have an angiogram. I said, you're right, I'm not saying that. But as far as the guidelines are concerned, obviously I'll put her on first treadmill. And if she can't do a treadmill, I'll go for an angiogram. And there we went for angiogram. And look at this angiogram of a right coronary shot, reasonably good amount of coronary vessels. There is no obstructive lesion, but looking at closely, it takes little longer time for the distal vessels to fill up. Okay, we went on to the left side shot, and left side shot very categorically showing that LID is taking a longer time to fill up. And this was a really, really good thing which we could show. And he said, look, this is normal thing. Look, there's no obstructive lesion. I said, let's complete the angiogram, and we completed the angiogram. It was a non-obstructive, and possibly what we could say that she is suffering from a slow flow state with no obstructive lesion and could be a microvascular disease. Again, one of these colleagues, he just walked away. Thank you guys, no cardiac problem. Send her home with a symptomatic treatment. She does not need anything. And now I have made the diagnosis. I said, yes, let's send her home. And we did what we did. We sent her home again on that particular day. That was 10th of October 12. And now the lady comes back again on 27th May 2013 with chest pain, severe sweating, Gabra, Beceni, and everything. And look at her blood pressure was 80/60. Heart rate was 110 beats per minute. And look at the ECG now at this particular moment. You could look at the ECG of 27/5/2013 done at 2.40 hours in the afternoon. T-wave inversion lead 2-3 AVF, beat 4 to V6, all of them they're showing, and she was in tachycardia. She had a low blood pressure. Another again question came, what to do now? And we called our colleague. He said, no, nothing is not there. I said, look, we have to do something with this lady, and we have to do something. So what we thought, let's do an exercise stress test. She already had 110 heart rate, test myocardial perfusion imaging, start some treatment, or look at a friend who's closer to him or her. And that's what we presume, that let's put her on a myocardial contrast echo. And fortunately, we had a myocardial contrast echo. We went on to a myocardial contrast echo with the same patient at that particular moment. And if I freeze my scale over here for a second, now if I freeze this scale, very interesting phenomena which was seen with this myocardial contrast echo was, I'm showing this, look, all these segments, basally segments, they're all filled up. And this is underperfused apical segments. Now I'll show frames, and that's what I made a lot of difference. Look, underperfused apical segments, as far as basal segment, they were all perfused very well. This was not seen in 4-chamber view. We went on to do a 3-chamber view also. And this 3-chamber view showed the same thing, with LV showing the apical segments which were underperfused as far as the myocardial contrast echo was concerned. We went on to look at the RV also at the same time, and RV was relatively spared with some kind of this kind of an apical segment, which appears to be a little underperfused. We said, look, again the question came back. We were showing a microvascular disease that we suspected from a coronary disease, and now we are talking about a perfusion defect in the apical segments, and to a large extent saying this literature from 2013 that category says that ACS in patients without obstructive lesion, we should look at a coronary microcirculation. And that's the functional alteration, and that closely matched with our segments, what we looked with our myocardial perfusion. And now these people, they had normal ejection fraction, the R score and all those things. I'm not going to talk on this platform over here. They were reasonably normal. Hence, conclusion, young female, recurrent chest pain, abnormal ECG, normal LV systolic function, normal diastolic function, abnormal perfusions. And on top of that, we could demonstrate that possibly she's suffering from a microvascular disease, and that's what she had. She was put on all these kind of a diltiazem, atorvastatin, aspirin, alprazolam, pantoprazole, sertraline, because she had some stressed out family matters, and that's what we added at that particular time. Now follow-up after a couple of months, 1 month follow-up, almost normal. 2013, 7-month follow-up, she was normal. And last follow-up, which we had in 2015, she was much better than before. Pain severity had markedly reduced, except the times of anxiety and stress, and ECG changes were. Now look, come down to pathophysiology of acute coronary syndrome. Now, looking at the literature, the 3 important things which have been very categorically published somewhere in 2013 by Kriya et al. In Journal of American College of Cardiology. talking of non-obstructive atherosclerosis could be because of the vasoconstrictor stimuli or dysfunctional endothelial or smooth muscle cells. On the contrary, you can have an obstructive ATS, and this obstructive ATS could be with systemic inflammation or without systemic inflammation. And whatever these pathologies, whether these non-obstructive or obstructive pathologies, they ultimately result to one single factor, is that proximal or distal spasm, plaque and erosion and fissures, white blood cell thrombus, or whatever the plaque fissure is. And here in obstructive pathology, when we do not have a systemic inflammation, physical emotional stress plays a lot of part. Subclinical inflammation also plays a lot of part, and local mechanical stress also plays a lot of part. On the contrary, if we have a systemic inflammations, we have autoantigens as well as infectious disease playing a lot of parts. Well, when we have these kind of abnormality in acute coronary syndrome, we can have an unstable angina, we can have a stable angina, we can have a non-ST elevation MI or ST elevation MI. I'm not going to go in details of these all four factors together, but I can say that multiple slides are present all around this literature or the internet today, and what we look is ultimately atheroma lining to coronary artery disease. And this is one slide which categorically says that reduction in oxygen supply or an increase of myocardial oxygen demand superimposed on a lesion that causes a coronary artery obstruction, usually an thrombotic coronary plaque. That is something like which we have an obstructive lesion, subsequently develops into a prismental or vasospastic angina, fixed stenosis, or online thrombus leading to ST elevation infarctions. Well, this physiology has been very, very beautifully outlined in this particular review article of European Heart Journal. And what did they say? Very categorically says, look at the pathophysiology for male and a female is entirely a little different phenomena. And so is the little management of these males and females with the pathophysiology, with their presentation, with their outcome in acute coronary syndromes. And this is a really, really busy slide. I would like to zoom up all these slides over here. As far as females are concerned, or a female gender is concerned, there's strong non-traditional risk predictors in women, like depression, mental stress, anxiety, psychological stress, and vital exhaustion. And look, these kind of a factor which was categorically present in a young female of ours, which we presented to us. And this kind of a females, when we have these kind of factors, which presents to this, and if you look at the data of 2013 paper publication, they produce a non-obstructive kind of a lesion. They can have a slow flow state or a vasospastic kind of issues. But if they develop an hypertension, or they smoke and have an obesity, which is very common because of a delivery when they don't lose weight, and these hypertension, then it becomes common in women with ACS than in men. Similarly, if the smoking obesity is there, they have a strongest risk predictor in women than in men. Then high prevalence in young women with acute coronary syndrome. And I still remember when I was doing my MD something in 84 to 85, a couple of my female colleagues, they used to smoke at the time in those early 80s. Then the most important thing is once they develop a diabetes and the gestational diabetes, which is pretty rampant. My wife is a gynecologist and we often see people coming back to us with a gestational diabetics. And I don't know what is your experience. I at least say 1 out of 3rd or 1 out of 4th women is almost a gestational diabetics. And when they develop a gestational diabetic, 50% of these women, over a period of they become diabetic. And when the diabetes gestation happens, the autoinflammation starts, the markers of inflammatory markers, they go up, and then they have a high prevalence of a younger woman with acute coronary syndromes. Diabetes leading to coronary kidney diseases, alteration of a kidney function, again a STEMI. And this is what I wanted to say a couple of seconds, I'll devote over here. Pregnancy-related risk, gestational diabetes, gestational hypertension, history of preeclampsia, increased risk of ACS from a coronary artery disease. And that's what is important in these subset of populations. Look, this is entirely a different kind of a ball game when we look in a female gender. when we talk of acute coronary syndrome, whether in young age or old age, versus if you look at the people who are in male gender, the risk factors, strong and independent predictor of traditional risk factors like hypertension, dyslipidemia, diabetes, and smoking. Traditional risk factors are strongest predictor for non-traditional risk factors in males. Then I'm not going to talk of assess care or a symptomatology, which I discussed a couple of minutes back. If I have to summarize all these factors which have been presented in this literature, which category says that, and I feel this is one of the most appropriate and clinical literature available on internet, which I always try to follow. Despite decline in cardiovascular disease over recent decades, the increased mortality rate has been observed in younger women. Women, they have a longer time from symptom onset to presentation, and they're less likely to have diagnostic testing. That is very, very true. Like if I happen to tell a female, if she has a chest pain, to get a testing done, first of all, if she is married, the husband says, no, she does not have any coronary disease. Two, the women itself said, how can I have a coronary disease at the age of 20, 30, 40? Two, ACS presentation can be similar between male and females. Over 80% of both reports chest pain when presenting with ACS, but females then have over like something like a heaviness in the abdomen or the lower part of the chest. And the more women report additional non-chest pain symptom, that's very important. As our patient, they never have like kind of other things, the other factors like very common. In addition, amongst those who are present without chest pain, females, they are more common, so you have to be very, very cautious in female patient presenting with this. Atherosclerotic plaque characteristically make it different by sex. Sex-related differences in coronary biology include higher myocardial blood flow in women compared to men, which may contribute to differences in shear stress and susceptibility to coronary artery disease. Moreover, hormone-mediated differences may contribute to sex-related differences in vascular differences. Stiffness. These differences may contribute to observation that women display different coronary plaque characteristics, more diffuse, non-obstructive, and reduced overall plaque burden. And that is very true when we look at these females, if they are not menstruating, if they are menstruating or the premenopausal area. Evidence also suggests that coronary artery calcium scoring may be a strongest risk factor among women as compared to men. Women, they're twice as likely to experience a microvascular angina as men, which is associated with increased ACS event and heart failure. And that's the most important thing is heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. Many of these people, they're coming back with heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. One of the paper which we recently wrote, the incidence of heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, male versus female, believe my words, in our lab, when we did this study, like more than 50% females were suffering from heart failure with preserved ejection fractions, and majority of them, they were hypertensive, diabetes, and then obese. And if you do a treadmill test or a pharmacological stress test in these people, they have a blunted heart response, and which again is a predictor for coronary flow reserve. In addition to microvascular related ACS, women are more likely to experience spontaneous coronary artery dissections or Takotsubo's. That's what I often seen with stress factors. Takotsubo is more prevalent among postmenopausal women than other group, when sudden coronary artery dissection is more prevalent on a younger woman presenting with acute coronary syndrome. And almost 1/3 of these women, they have no culprit coronary artery lesion when we subject for angiogram. A menopausal transition, which changes in estrogen, may contribute to changes of women risk for cardiovascular disease, and they behave like a man when these menopausal changes happen. Estrogen declines in menopause has been associated with change in body fat distribution, endothelial dysfunction, vascular inflammation, sympathetic tone, and insulin resistance. Larger trial with human response, I'm not going to talk about all this. Woman is more likely to have a worse health status than it men at the time of ACS. If they smoke, if they have a diabetes, they're the strongest risk factor among the women income. Smoking cardiovascular risk is highest among young and middle-aged women. And that's very true. We find many women, younger age women, especially in corporate world, they smoke a lot. Sex difference in socioeconomic status, psychological burdens, mental health may contribute again to cardiovascular risk among women. Evidence suggests that depression and a perceived stress are predictive for cardiovascular risk in young and middle-aged women. Pregnancy at the time when the woman cardiovascular risk can be assessed, pregnancy complications including preeclampsia, placental abrasion, gestational hypertension, and diabetes appear to increase with the woman risk for further cardiovascular disease. And on top of that, if we talk of preterm delivery may be associated with future cardiovascular risk. If you look at this particular paper that emphasizes so much about this illness, that you can predict about a woman's cardiovascular risk factor during the time when she is pregnant or once she has delivered a child. Thank you very much. I hope I'm able to do a justice with your